Hey, 7th graders. So you guys should have just finished up lesson 3.3, which is great because now we're going to move on to our next little talk about symbiosis. So this is a great little segue because the last thing you guys did in 3.3 was read an article about an acacia ant and an acacia tree. Okay, and what you guys got to see is this concept that they have this mutualistic relationship where they help each other out. They live together, they live in harmony, and there's no damage caused by either organism to the other organism. They have an awesome relationship and they want to maintain that relationship because they get a lot of perks from it. Okay, so this is kind of getting us started on our lesson to finish up today called symbiosis. So you have two learning targets that you're going to pull out of this is I can define symbiosis, and then I can identify examples of symbiosis as either mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism. So obviously this little word mutualism should sound a little familiar to you guys after answering that question about the ant and the acacia tree. Okay, so this is really, like I said, that article is a really great segue for us to talk about symbiosis next. So the very first thing I want you guys to do is go to the next slide and copy and paste this little picture of your notes into your OneNote. So go into the populations and resources section. You're gonna go to the community interactions page, and then just below the notes that you guys should have added a couple weeks ago or a couple lessons ago about community interactions, I want you guys to paste this little note section on symbiosis. Okay, so a few lessons ago, you guys were supposed to watch a video about community interactions. If you guys have not done that, you really need to go do that, okay? Keep in mind that these little lesson videos that are attached in your assignments are my replacement for you guys having to sit in a 100-minute class and listen to me talk to students that you guys can't even see. So please make sure you guys are doing this. This is your substitute from sitting in class, okay? So this needs to be done. Okay, so watch your community interactions. We learned a lot about competition through those notes, and then also through our lesson 3.1 and 3.2. You guys are learning that one species competes for another species for resources, and sometimes that leads to the death of a species. Not always. It's not always the intent. It's really just survival of one species. Whatever happens to the other one is whatever happens. Okay, then we learned about predator-prey, which has really been something that we've focused on throughout this whole unit, whether we're talking about, algae getting eaten by zooplankton getting eaten by moon jellies, those kinds of things. That's been an underlying theme throughout this whole unit. Okay, so finally today what we're talking about is symbiosis. So the relationship of two different species living together and how they help or harm each other is going to be our definition for symbiosis. But the key word you're really looking for here is living. Okay, you notice that, we have one species that's definitely succeeding and becoming successful at life. They're getting the resources they need, and the other species maybe is not. It doesn't mean they're necessarily dying, doesn't mean they're necessarily living, but that's competition. Predator-prey, there's that intent to kill. Okay, we're killing and we're going to eat every little bit of you. You're not surviving that predator-prey attack. Versus symbiosis, it's really important that you guys focus on the fact that these are two species that their every intent is to not kill another species because they will not get the benefits they need if that species dies. Okay, so we're again focusing on that focus that they're not going to die, they're living. Okay, so let's go down. There's 3 different types of symbiosis, and again, one should already be a little familiar to you guys. Really, technically, 2 of these should be familiar to you guys because at some point in your life you've heard of a parasite. Okay, so symbiosis again is the relationship of 2 different species living together. And there's 3 types. The first one that you guys discussed when you read the ant and the acacia article is mutualism, where both species benefit. So an example could be a bee and a flower. So those bee and those flowers, they really like being in contact with each other in an ecosystem. Okay, the bee gets all that pollen to take back to their little hive and help make food for their colony. And a flower gets that bee to come pollinate for it. The main focus for most species is to reproduce and propagate their species so that species doesn't die out. And the bee enables the flower to do that. Okay, that bee comes and lands on it, gets pollen all over their body, and then moves on to the next flower and is able to pollinate so they can produce seeds that can grow into new flowers. Okay, so again, this is a mutualistic benefit. You guys can see the word mutual and mutualism. That means they both have a positive relationship. And really what symbiosis is focusing on is how is there a positive relationship between 2 different species? Predator-prey, not so much positive between 2 species. Positive for one, The prey doesn't always have a positive interaction with a predator. Okay, and same with competition. It's usually positive for one, but the one who's getting booted out of that competition and not getting the resources they need, it's not so much positive for them. Okay, versus you guys will see a lot more positive relationships in here. Not always the case, but you guys will see some examples. Okay, so again, mutualism is both positive for both species. They really like to have that relationship. Okay, and again, you guys learned about that in the ant and the acacia article, how the ant gets something from the acacia tree, and the acacia tree also gets something back from the ant. Okay, moving on, commensalism is our next type of symbiosis. It's where one species benefits, but the other is not harmed or benefited. So it's not hurt at all, but it also doesn't get any perk from having this organism living in close contact. For that reason, it really just doesn't care if the organism is living in close contact. It's not a prey or a predator to them. It's not competing with them in any way, but it's also just not helping them in any sort either. So an example I gave you guys is a barnacle and a whale. Okay, so you guys maybe have all seen barnacles, whether it's in a movie or in a picture or in real life. They're these little hard, kind of weird volcano-looking organisms. They have a shell, and then the organism lives inside the shell, and they attach themselves to different things. Maybe it's like a dock on a pier, or a boat, or in this case, a whale, okay? The barnacle, because it attaches itself to something, it doesn't move. It can't just turn around and swim away and go find food. Okay, so it needs to have a lot of moving water that comes past it, and that moving water kind of basically brings food to its mouth. And that's how they're able to eat. So if they're not constantly having water move past them, they're going to starve to death. So they attach themselves to things like boats, or in this case, again, a whale. So whale constantly swimming around, constantly has water moving past that barnacle, and that barnacle is high on the hog. It has lots of food moving past it to eat. On the other hand, though, the whale has no benefit from the barnacle. There is nothing positive coming from the barnacle attaching to the whale. But on the other hand, there's not anything negative happening anyway. That barnacle attaching to that whale's thick skin does not bug it at all. It doesn't eat barnacles, so it's really not under that predator-prey community interaction. So, you know, there's really nothing. That whale is not bugged by the barnacle at all. But it's also not help. There's no benefit from having barnacles on your body. Okay, and last but not least, this other one should be fairly familiar to you guys because you've all heard of parasites. So this is parasitism, where one species is benefit and the other is harm. So you guys can think of like a mosquito in a human or a tick in a human. But oftentimes when you guys think of like a tick, you guys think Lyme disease, and you're like, well, Lyme disease can kill. So how is that not predator-prey? Okay, because I mean, obviously with predator-prey, you guys are feeding off of them, you're eating their body, if you will. But the difference is that they're not killing them, okay? If the organism dies, that parasite no longer gets what it needs to survive, and it has to go find a new body to infest, okay? So the difference is that a parasite is going to be a lot happier if the organism that it's decided to become a host to, if it lives, okay? Because it can constantly have a supply of blood or whatever it needs. Okay, so one species is benefit, the other is harmed. So obviously you guys have all been bitten by a mosquito, you get the itchies, you're not liking that. You can also look at things like West Nile. Obviously a mosquito isn't like, oh, I'm gonna come give you guys some West Nile. It doesn't really know it has West Nile, and it doesn't intend to pass that on and kill its host. Again, and there's a benefit to that human being staying alive or that animal staying alive when it comes and feeds off of it. All right, so again, one species is benefit, the other is harmed. So there's a positive interaction for the one species, the tick, whatever the case is. But on the other hand, the other species is generally harmed in some way, whether it's just losing a little bit of blood or it's catching a disease unintentionally from the parasite, whatever the case is. You guys have all heard of tapeworms. Tapeworms are these really long worms that sometimes you get in your food. Doesn't happen very often for us here in America, but it does happen on occasion. And that tapeworm loves to live inside of your intestines and grow and grow and grow and grow. And they can grow quite long. But basically, as long as you're alive and eating, you are feeding that tapeworm and they are getting nutrients from you that your body can't take in. So you guys are losing nutrients and maybe eating more, but that little tapeworm's living high on the hog, being inside your body. Fun fact about tapeworms, they are all segmented. They all kind of look like a bunch of little squares attached to each other. Let's pull up a tapeworm and look at it. But if you guys were to split that segment, that worm can regenerate. So if you were to try to like pull that tapeworm out, and you rip a section off, you might think you have all of it, but what's left of that tapeworm can still regenerate, which is really quite disgusting. So you guys can see what tapeworms look like. Not a pretty sight to imagine that living inside of your guys' intestines. Okay. All right. So moving on. Those are your 3 types of symbiosis. Again, we have mutualism, where you see the word mutual there. Both have a benefit. Okay, commensalism, one species benefits, but there's no harm or no help for the other species. There's no bother whatsoever. And then parasitism, you guys have that one species that gets a great benefit, but the other species is getting harmed in some way, but not with the intent to kill, like predator-prey relationships. All right, so moving on to your guys' worksheet or your activity for today is you guys are given 18 examples of different species living together in an ecosystem, and you guys are going to use the draw tool to circle either mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism as one of the 3 types of symbiosis to describe that relationship. So for instance, barnacles create home sites by attaching themselves to whales. They get a place to live, but the whales see no advantage or disadvantage from the barnacles. So we already know that one's commensalism. So you guys can use your draw tool to circle commensalism. Okay. Yucca flowers are pollinated by yucca moths. The moths lay their eggs in the flowers where the larvae hatch. And although they eat some of the developing seeds, they still help pollinate when they become adults. So that would be mutualism, because you guys have a place for the moths to lay their eggs, and they, even as they're born, get a little bit of food, but they, as they fly away, they also pollinate for the yucca flowers, and so the yucca is able to reproduce that way. So that's actually a mutual benefit. And then ticks will feed on a deer's blood. Sometimes the ticks carry disease, such as Lyme disease, that are passed on to the deer. So obviously this disease is going to hurt the deer. The deer is also losing blood, not necessarily a massive amount of blood, but still a little invasive. I'd rather keep all my blood in my body and then not have a bug living on me. So that would be parasitism here with the ticks and the deer's blood. Okay, so you guys will go through the rest of these, the other 15 of these examples, and again, you'll just circle either mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism for each one. If you guys have any questions, feel free to call in at this point. Everyone else should be working on the same thing, so I can help you guys out if you have any specific questions. Anyway, I hope you guys are all having a good day. If you guys finish up, check over your answers, and go ahead and turn this in. And have a great day. Bye.